Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. The high-level session of the UNGA has kick-started in New York. It has brought together 140 world leaders with the aim to promote global peace and security. 90 presidents, 43 prime ministers and the crown prince are expected to speak at the UNGA, outlining their visions for resolving the ongoing conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, tackling the escalating climate crisis and confronting the risks associated with fast-paced advancements of artificial intelligence. This year's theme is Better Together, 80 years and more for peace, development and human rights. External Affairs Minister of India, S. Jaishankar, will be representing India at the General Assembly. Meanwhile, in moments from now, US President Donald Trump will be delivering the first address of his second term to global leaders at the United Nations General Assembly high-level meeting. I'm being joined by my colleagues. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor is on the telecast with me. Ambassador Kapoor, thank you very much. And of course, the high-level meeting, the general debate that has kick-started today. President Trump is going to be speaking shortly. What is expected? What are going to be the outcomes of the UNGA? Prime amongst them, of course, a lot of talk that has happened. Recognition of Palestine is something that major countries and their heads of states are demanding. Ambassador Kapoor, can you hear me? Okay, we'll try to get Ambassador Kapoor in just a short while. Raymond Vickery is also on the show with me. Raymond, thank you very much. And of course, the same question, what is expected from US President Donald Trump? There has been a message that is loud and clear from America that it is not going to recognize Palestine. It has vetoed in the past all efforts of the United Nations and countries put together to recognize Palestine, and really it will have a massive impact on how the situation in the Middle East can be salvaged to its best.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It seems to me that what President Trump is likely to say and do will be a continuation of his approach to multilateral organizations to build peace and prosperity generally. And that approach is to denigrate them in favor of building up himself in terms of a bilateral approach to any problem. As you know, basically the United Nations relies very heavily on U.S. funding, and he is taken that to task. I think he'll do the same thing that he's done with NATO members in saying that other countries are taking advantage of the United States in regard to funding, and they're not gonna do it. In regard to the Middle East, he will support Israel down the line. He'll take to task France and the other nations who've done recognition. What this will be an exercise in self-aggrandizement. Again, he'll claim that he has solved 7 international conflicts already during his term. Of course, we know that India has denied at least one of those in his claim that he solved a Pakistan-India confrontation over the dreadful atrocities that were committed by terrorists in Kashmir. So I think it's going to be more of the same. The ultimate objective of the Trump administration really is to destroy a multilateral approach which has served the world so well since World War II in terms of keeping the peace and trying to build peace and prosperity. And he will blame others for his not being able to fulfill his promise to end the Ukraine war. He'll blame others in regard to the Middle East. And there will not be, from his remarks, the kind of positive approach that we need to be able to build peace and prosperity in the world.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I'm also being joined by Professor Madhav Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, what in your opinion is going to be the key takeaway for India, keeping in mind that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has skipped the UNGA 80th session? I think it's very apparent why this was done. Until and unless there was a possibility, in fact, it was confirmed that there would be a bilateral between President Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There was hesitation on the part of the Indian government for the head of the government to travel to the UNGA, and therefore a representative in the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar was sent as an envoy of India to represent the country at the UNGA. Again, the key expectations here from India, while there has been a meeting that has happened on the sidelines between Marco Rubio and S. Jaishankar, what more can really India expect, even as and also the Commerce Minister is in New York right now holding a meeting with Howard Lutnick?
Look, Megha, I think we can reasonably expect very little. The fact of the matter is that it's very ironic that President Trump is addressing the UN General Assembly, for the fact is that he has slashed UN funding and slashed it to all the UN agencies. There is no question about it. So far as climate change is concerned, Trump doesn't believe in climate change. He doesn't believe that any of the weather patterns that we're seeing now is because of any human activity. He regards them as forces of nature, independent of human activity. And I think he's given a very low priority to questions of the environment. And other UN agencies also. He has criticized every one of them in turn. So he's basically going on an attack mode against what he calls the globalist world order, by which he probably means a world order in which the whole world comes together, as is happening at the UNGA. So essentially he's going there to basically criticize the UNGA. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, it's a long way from peace and it's not going to happen. And in the meantime, the United States is making a lot of money under Donald Trump because they are giving weapons to Ukraine, paid for by the Europeans, and European taxpayers are footing the bill. They are very happy about it, and increasingly public opinion, public pressure is building on each of these leaders to do something about the situation and to ensure that the money that they are spending from the taxpayers, from their own pocket, for this endless conflict, quote unquote, is slowed down and stopped. As far as Gaza is concerned, you're quite right. Trump is completely opposed to any recognition of Palestine. Now the Europeans are recognizing Palestine. They have come a bit late to the party. India recognized Palestine and Israel as soon as the countries were formed. As soon as that. Now the European powers are coming a little late to the party. And again, frankly, I don't think we're going to have any question of any change of situation on the ground. The two big absentees will be Israel and the United States. And these are the two countries and the two alone that can ensure the next steps for peace in Gaza. So neither of them have signed on to that. Neither of them have even signed on to the question of Palestine. Netanyahu is very clear that Palestine as a concept is completely a work of fiction. And he is basically focused on recovering the land of in ancient Israel was called the land of Judea and Samaria. So very honestly, Megha, it's very ironic that President Trump is addressing an institution that he at least publicly has such a poor opinion of. So anyway, it'll be interesting to watch his speech and interesting to watch his criticism. After all, he is the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And despite all the efforts of other countries to overtake the US is still by far the primary power in the world. Megha.
Absolutely. Ambassador Kapoor is back on the telecast with us. Ambassador Kapoor, again, a situation where when the External Affairs Minister gives that speech at the UNGA General Debate, this is going to happen on the 27th of this month. It is anticipated the likelihood of him talking about the Pahalgam terror attack and India's military strike and the global fight against terrorism is something India has talked about at multilateral forums as well. How is the United Nations General Assembly going to adopt this resolution, because it is an important one, integral to global peace and ensuring terrorism is extradited?
Thank you, Megha. And India has been addressing this issue at the UNGA regularly, and it's time for the world to understand the threats posed by terrorism to all the countries concerned. And they have to come together and adopt this resolution, and it is high time for that. Even to declare, terrorists who have been shouting from the rooftops that they are terrorists, for the UN has been a stretch. And I'm sure that, with the US backing and with other countries backing, it may find some more traction this time. But we'll have to wait and see. Because also we'll be celebrating very soon, as you know, October 2nd, which has been declared by the UN as the International Day of Non-Violence, which is also the birth anniversary of Lal Bahadur Shastri and Mahatma Gandhi. So at least on that occasion, by that day, some forward movement should take place, because 27 September, the address will be there by the External Affairs Minister, and thereafter there will be some deliberations. But there are so many other important issues also facing the UN, and including the threats posed by certain countries which are not following the rules-based order, the threats in the Indo-Pacific, the threats by the political Islam, jihadi Islam, the threats by the woke community. So those are not going to be discussed in great detail in the UN.
Yeah.
But the climate change is going to be an important area of focus. And as very rightly mentioned by Professor Nalapat, since the US under the current administration does not give much store to the analysis or the data or the basis of climate change, it's not going to be, able to gain sufficient traction or attention. Megha.
Andrew Latham is also on the show with me. And Andrew, yes, President Trump's speech at the UNGA is important, but what is even more important is this on the sidelines, the meetings that he is going to be holding today. He's expected to meet a number of Muslim majority nations, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt. He's also likely to meet Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. But keeping the focus on Palestine and the recognition of Palestine, which looks like, Europe coming together, France, Canada, Australia, Portugal, United Kingdom, they've all recognized a separate state of Palestine and called for an end of the war, end of the onslaught of the Israeli Defense Forces onto the civilians in Gaza. And of course, it is going to be vetoed by the United States of America at the UNGA. So again, it becomes symbolic. It is futile. But what do you think is going to be the future of the conflict in Gaza? And does it completely depend on how America, which side America tilts to?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know this. It will not be decided at the UN General Assembly. We need to not romanticize that organ. It is a talking shop. Important business gets done on the margins, the sidelines, and the corridors. And there's an opportunity for signaling, especially to domestic audiences back home. But it doesn't have any real power. The real work of the UN gets done in the specialized agencies and at the UN Security Council. And I would remind your viewers of something they don't need reminding of, that when it comes to the permanent members of the UN Security Council that can exercise a veto, India is not there. 1.4 billion people are not there. Why do I say this? Because the United Nations was constructed at a time, really, of unipolarity right after the Second World War. Then it evolved in the context of bipolarity during the Cold War. It is out of date and needs radical reconstruction. Now, Not along the lines that Donald Trump is suggesting. I don't think he has the vaguest clue what he's talking about when it comes to multilateral organizations. I really don't. When it comes, though, to those conversations on the sidelines, I will say this, that I think President Trump is going to signal publicly and privately that American policy vis-a-vis Israel-Palestine is the same as it has been since 1948. It hasn't changed since Harry Truman supported the creation of the State of Israel, which, by the way, got UN Security Council approval and is actually a recognized country in international law. Palestine is not, and in fact it cannot be because there are no agreed borders, one of the absolute base requirements in international law for recognition of a state. So whatever signaling the UK and Canada and Spain and France are doing in this venue, it is for public consumption back home to placate important constituencies and demographics back home. It will not change the needle a jot when it comes to recognition of Palestine. The other thing that President Trump will do is, in addition to signaling his unwavering support, like every other American president for the last 80 years, for the State of Israel, he will be attempting to placate Israel's Arab neighbors, especially those that have either moved in the direction of normalization with Israel or are thinking of it, Saudi Arabia being prominently in the latter camp. He can't afford to alienate those states entirely because there is still something of a Cold War going on in the Persian Gulf between Saudi Arabia and the GCC states and Iran, with China in the mix. He can't afford to alienate them. So he's going to walk a line privately. But publicly, I just don't see him throwing Israel under the bus in any way, shape, or form.
No, absolutely. We see on our screens right now the UNGA general debate in session. Today is day one. It is going to carry on up until the 29th is when it is the closing day of the UNGA and a resolution that is going to be adopted. We see Lula da Silva, the president of Brazil, right now addressing the members who are participating in the UNGA. Previously, we saw Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the UN, who was addressing the members. After that, we also saw the UNGA president, Baerbock, who was also addressing the heads of states that have arrived to attend this meeting. Anticipated at this point of time eagerly the President of America, Donald Trump's speech that is going to start in just a moment from now. Coming back to you, Professor Nalapat, about, when you talk about, I think the very concept of multilateralism has been distorted, has been completely done away with by the Trump administration as we see today. And it looks like, whether we talk about NATO, whether we talk about the United Nations, there is at this time a measure that has been taken is for the interest of the country by way of protectionism, anti-immigration, and this is very reflective in the western part of the world, including Europe. And it looks like in today's day and age there are no enemies and there are no friends, there are no groupings, and countries are working for their own vested interests, for their economies, for their welfare, and will align themselves by way of diplomacy, bilateral relations and trade with other countries which are supportive of their cause, or where there is mutual respect and mutual interest that is at the foremost of the relationship that is built. Do you think the utility of United Nations and the UNGA today has diminished further?
Look, the UNGA, as has correctly been said, is a forum for countries to express their point of view, and almost entirely for domestic audiences in the case of democracies, and for certain powers in the case of autocracies. The reality is that Donald Trump is living in a world. I mean, you had what's called the theory of Hobbes, and the all-powerful sovereign. So his idea is an all-powerful sovereign, namely himself, running the all-powerful sovereign of the whole world, namely the United States. And I mean, that is the underlying concept. So this goes completely counter to any concept of multilateralism, to any concept of sharing of power. Hobbes favored and a completely omnipotent sovereign, and he said that that is very necessary to prevent social chaos. Donald Trump couldn't have agreed more, except that you replace the king with the president of the United States, who of course is an elected leader. But the reality is, Mega, the world is very different. The world is very different from what Donald Trump believes it is. And what is happening is prices are rising in the United States, jobs are falling, consumer confidence is falling, and very frankly, Trump is losing popularity very, very fast. So the reality is, in today's world, you have to learn to adjust. You have to learn to look at mutuality of interest. You can't look at zero-sum situations in which you derive the entire benefit and the other party walks away with nothing. That's not going to work. But that unfortunately is the approach taken by Donald Trump. My way or the highway. And very frankly, many countries are choosing the highway because the highway seems to be much more comfortable than my way, which frankly is not even the way of the United States. For example, you're talking about skilled immigration of doctors and technical people from India has been going on the US for decades and decades. And frankly, even Donald Trump has put an exemption for doctors. I'm sure he'll do that for skilled technicians also. Why? Because they help the US economy.
Yeah.
So there are immigrants and there are immigrants. And I understand that you undocumented immigrants, people who probably will not be paying much in taxes or any taxes at all. People who are likely to commit violent crime. I agree about that. But there are some very desirable types of immigration.
Yeah.
So create a fear of immigration in the mind of even those who are, frankly, good for the United States. You're not helping the United States at all, Megha.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, India's response for the H-1B visa hike, the fee hike, has obviously had a very strong response from India. The Indian government, the Ministry of External Affairs, said that it is going to have major humanitarian consequences, and the government is studying into this entire change that is going to be brought about if that visa fee is once implemented. Coming back to you, Raymond, Vikri, about the situation, and particularly about right now, Lula da Silva is talking. He has there's no love lost between President Trump and the President of Brazil. Trump has been doubling down on Brazil, where Lula da Silva has been seeking China and Russia and India and calling out for BRICS to reduce its dependency on the dollar, to have trade with each other and not be completely dependent on America. So how do things go from here? Do you think tariffs are also going to be a point of discussion and a major point of discussion, especially with countries that have been hurt badly by the Trump tariff war?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. They have been hurt badly, and the entire multilateral system has been hurt very badly by these Trump tariffs. We had a World Trade Organization, a multilateral approach, and before that, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which provided a way in which nations could get together and operate by consensus in a multilateral way. Trump basically has destroyed that. What Trump will do is say that he has increased the reality of prosperity for the United States by doing this. Nothing could be further from the truth. He was elected in part on bringing down inflation. I can't think of any more inflationary cause than these increased tariffs. So yes, he will take credit for really an alternative reality which doesn't exist, in saying that it's been very good. I think at this time there's a need for other nations such as India to step forward and provide leadership for the rule of law, for a multilateral approach in regard to international relations. Plainly, President Trump has abdicated the role of leader of the free world, and it is time for others, whether they be India, Brazil, other democracies in Western Europe, to step forward and provide some leadership for basic principles of non-aggression, non-imperialism, multilateral approach to build peace and prosperity.
Yes.
Without that, the international system, as we've known it, is going to continue to decline.
Right, absolutely. We just saw visuals on our screens. US President Donald Trump has arrived at the UNGA, at the United Nations headquarters. He's going to be speaking very soon. You know, he is scheduled to speak a few moments after the president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, finishes his speech. Ambassador Kapoor, in wake of a number of issues that are being raised and are going to be raised in the course of the next one entire week, Ukraine is another issue that is at the front and center. There have been pressure that has been put by the Trump administration on European Union to sanction, to penalize countries including India and China for buying Russian oil. Do you think these issues are going to be raised? Of course, Zelensky over here, the advocate who has been appreciating Trump administration's move to impose 25% additional tariffs on India.
Well, those things are going to be important. They're going to be discussed. But the reactions of the countries are already known to all these issues, including the tariffs on India, including the Russian reactions. So while the issue is an important one, it will be discussed in depth. And earlier, some of the resolutions which have been passed have been, vetoed by some countries. So I don't know whether it'll gain much. It'll have any movement from where it was earlier, because with Russia and China firmly vetoing any efforts by the other countries, it may not make any headway. So I don't think there will be any resolution on the issue.
Right.
I think it'll be one of the important points which will be discussed. And of course, it also reflects in a way the powerlessness of the UN as we have seen it evolve now over time and where it is currently. Because we see that more and more after the World War II, for example, the League of Nations had to be cast aside and a new body had to be created in 1945. So now it's 80 years and the UN is proving itself unequal to the task. So the world should start a discussion at the UN itself on what is a good format for the future, because without India's voice being there in the Security Council as a permanent member, one of the most populous countries of the world and one of the major drivers of the global economy, for it not to be represented at the UN Security Council as a permanent member is an absurdity in the current day and age.
Similarly, that's another problem that we have been at this point of time fighting. Of course, we get support from the United States, from France and from other UNSC permanent 5 members, except for China, that continues to veto us, and that is not allowing for India to be part of the permanent membership at the UNSC. Quickly, a comment from you, Andrew, before I wrap this up. It's interesting to know that while President Trump is going to be meeting all the Muslim majority nations, he is going to be meeting on the sidelines President Zelensky. There are no meetings, bilaterals, that at this point of time have been announced with other European nations, heads of states. Why do you think that it might be?
Well, I imagine it's got to do with the practicalities of time allocation. He can't be everywhere, obviously. And what are his priorities? He's signaled over and over again that Europe is not one of his priorities at the moment, but the Middle East, the Indo-Pacific, the Western Pacific in particular are his priorities. And I think he's going to devote his time and energy to those conversations, especially the highest of high-profile issues right now, which is recognition of Palestine. And then by way of, briefly by way of context, I agree with the ambassador entirely. This is, the League of Nations ran its course, and the United Nations has run its course. This is a moment not of global multilateralism, but of minilateralism, echoing what you said earlier about multi-alignment. And this is a multipolar era. Multi-alignment, sometimes you're on this team, sometimes you're on that team, and minilaterals like the Quad or ASEAN are the order of the day. And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, another example. I think we're going to see the proliferation of these minilateral organizations and the slow, I hope not too slow, dismantling of these increasingly ineffectual, nostalgically attractive vestiges of the Second World War, which simply no longer are fit for purpose.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining me on the telecast and talking to us on this 80th UNGA session, the general debate, the high-level meeting that is currently underway. It's day one. Stay tuned on NewsX. On the other side, we are talking about the major issue that has been at the forefront, that has been the bane of existence of citizens in our country, potholes and the problems it has been creating, and the lack of support and action from the governments of the day, state and central, that are causing a lot of pain and hindrances for the citizenry of the country. Stay tuned.